You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome to another Friday edition of Cards to the Moon. This is episode 287. My name is Clark from 5cardguys.com and 5cardguys on Instagram and YouTube and on Facebook. So I'm doing another quick solo intro today because in just a minute, I'll be playing a joint pod I did earlier this week with Paul Hickey of the Sports Card Strategy Show. We answered a bunch of questions that he actually got from collectors who subscribe to his nooffseason.com website. And I think it'll be of value to many Cards to the Moon listeners as well. So stay tuned for that. But quickly, off the top, I know there was the Topps Industry Conference that took place this past week as well. And Hyung and I actually just recorded a pod to talk about several of those announcements that came from the event. We'll be playing that episode on Tuesday. But in the meantime, I think it's safe to say that if we weren't already bullish on the hobby, we're definitely even more so now. And yes, it's not perfect, and there's definitely room for improvement in the way we can enjoy the hobby. But overall, I personally love the direction the hobby is going in general, and I'm on the record for saying the hobby seems to be big enough and diverse enough for all kinds of collectors and investors to enjoy the hobby. Anyway, make sure you don't miss next Tuesday's episode where we dive deeper into what was announced at the annual Topps Industry Conference. Now, one last thing while I have your attention. If you haven't already and you've been enjoying tuning into our podcast week after week, we really appreciate if you leave a positive review, a positive rating wherever you listen to your podcast. I know it definitely helps a lot to get the word out there about Cards to the Moon. Thank you in advance. Okay, now let's go ahead and play the joint pod with Paul Hickey. Enjoy.
What's up? Clark Kim from Cards to the Moon, 5 Card Guys. Good to have you back on the Sports Card Strategy Show. Cards to the Moon listeners, good to be back on Cards to the Moon. Clark, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. We're just talking off air how I was recovering from the flu, so I'm glad we're able to record this a week late, but I'm glad to have this discussion today.
Yeah, you sound great.
Thank you.
Just hit the mute button if you need to do some business over there. I'm
sure.
just joking. So we like to talk about obviously how to make money flipping sports cards at the Sports Card Strategy Show and nooffseason.com. But there's always a lot going on in the hobby. I know you guys at Cards to the Moon are collectors and flippers and you know, kind of into just about everything that goes on in the hobby, and you guys do a great job. So I thought we would have a discussion today for our listeners. We at nooffseason.com had a webinar for our premium members recently, and it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of great questions. We covered a lot of great topics. We tried to keep them sort of evergreen, which for those of you who don't know what that means, basically like not dated topics, like kind of things that would probably always be able to help you with whatever you're trying to do in the hobby. So, Clark, I thought maybe I could just kind of ask you the questions and we can have a discussion about all these topics here.
Sure.
And actually, there's one that is not in the show notes that I thought maybe we would lead off with because I want to get your take on it. So we've each recently had a conversation with Gary Vaynerchuk on our shows. Mm-hmm. And we know that he's a great collector. We know he's been in the hobby since he was a kid. You and I have both met him individually at various card shows and other events. He's been on our shows in the past, and he's recently been on our shows talking about among other things, Topps Chrome V-Friends and his passion for fictional characters. And he talked about this on Cards to the Moon with you, where he really, really believes that the fictional character rookie cards are going to go up in value. I would like your take on that, since it's it's fresh in our minds. What after talking to Gary, I'm sure you did your research before and after that interview. How do you feel about that?
I generally tend to agree with that because I'm starting to get a little bit more into Pokemon cards. We talked about this in our joint pod before, and I'm still incredulous that the first edition Pikachu is a few $1,000s. Pokemon being one of the largest, if not the largest IP in the world right now in terms of trading card games. And first edition Pikachu cards are PSA 10, Red Cheeks, if that means anything to you guys. It's about 5,000 USD or so, 6,000 maybe now, because it's always increasing and Pokemon cards are really hot right now. But on that wavelength, I could see how the rookie card of Spider-Man, which Gary Vee was talking about, could be worth a lot more because of how many people know the character, Marvel characters. And as trading cards become a bigger thing in culture, I think these Marvel, Pokemon, V-Friends, fans of fictional characters will want a piece of the action. And what better way to really commemorate your fandom by collecting original first edition trading cards of these characters. So I could see a pathway for it to really be really valuable in the future. But that's obviously a lot has to break right as well. The character development has to be there and it has to always be continuous. You can't just hope for the best. You got to develop these characters. And I might be biased about Gary Vee, but I think he's really putting a lot of resources into building the V Friends, on the map. And so I'm bullish on that. And we don't have to talk about Spider-Man or Pikachu. They're already well known across the world. So yeah, I think there's a way for trading cards of these characters to be really sought after.
Yeah, I respect your thoughts on that, and that's why I wanted to ask you. I feel like you're always very objective, and like you and I both kind of have a special place in our heart. I can tell you do as well for Gary and for his hard work. So I believe that he's gonna make that IP succeed. I really do. And we've seen it. I mean, it's new compared to a lot of the other IP, but it's not brand new. I mean, it's been around. Like he mentioned Zero Cool. I remember the Zero Cool release back in, I think, early 2022, something like that. So it's been several years, and it's only getting stronger with the partnership with Topps Chrome and everything like that. So I do agree that that IP will continue to become popular. I mean, the proof has been in the pudding with Gary in terms of what he's been able to do. And I could see his vision come to life in terms of just putting those characters and future storylines and things like that out into culture in a way that's relevant and could drive up the pricing on the initial Topps Chrome release. You mentioned something too when you talked to him, where you hit the point on like it's important to be able to get in on the ground floor on things, and so this is an opportunity where people can do that early on. I mean, F1 was an interesting like boom within the hobby, kind of a micro market in the hobby for like the first couple of years of the Topps Chrome F1. And then there's been a lot of other examples of that within, like Disney Lorcana, if you want to go the fictional route, was kind of the same thing. So now that there's this V Friends release, I totally agree with you. I think where I struggle to spend money on it myself is that the selling marker. Like, how long do we have to wait for the selling marker? And so when I think about whether it's V Friends or whether it's a more well-known IP, like you mentioned Spider-Man, so we'll just kind of keep our Pokemon. So we'll just kind of keep that as the other example, even though there's all the different Marvel characters and so many others that we could go to. I think that when you're buying like a Jackie Robinson rookie or a Michael or maybe a Michael Jordan rookie or something like that, you know that you probably need to wait several years before you might want to sell that, or you may never sell that. Like you may never sell that, or you might be thinking, okay, well, if I go invest, maybe it was you once upon a time with your Mike Trout card, or different cards like that, where you're thinking, okay, this could be 10 to 20 years before I sell this. Do you think that the appreciation in value on these fictional character rookie cards will take a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10, 20 years? Like what do you, when you kind of get out your crystal ball, and because you're very objective and you're very smart about these things. I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything, but to me, it strikes me as a completely different type of play, whether it's V-Friends or whether it's Spider-Man,
Right.
than going out and buying like a Victor Wembanyama card that could go up during next year's NBA playoffs.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is the $1,000,000 question, right? When is a good selling marker? When is the right time? And I feel like things like V-Friends, if you get on the ground floor, I'm viewing it more as like a long-term hold, right? And like, I mean, when long-term is relative as well, 10 years could be long for some people, 10 days could be long for some people, right? So depends what kind of flipper you are. But if you were on the ground floor on Pokemon, that's 1999. I know it's a while ago, but at the same time, it's in our lifetime, right? It's not like Jackie Robinson. I wasn't born in 1948, and Pokemon 1999, it's not that long ago. But if you bought Pokemon then and you kept it in good condition, the selling market will be right now where everyone's in a frenzy about Pokemon cards, right? So 25, 26 years, that's could be one possibility. But the X factors are the way things are built now in terms of technology, in terms of communication, the internet. There's a possibility for IP to grow much faster than it has in the past, like with Pokemon and some of the older cartoon characters, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like things like that where you just watch after school every day and then it becomes nostalgic. But now you got YouTube shows and they upload 3 times a day sometimes for some of these characters. It's crazy the kind of output that's possible now with computer animation and things like that. So I think it's different this time because of technology and just the different plays you can have to build IP. But at the same time, like you or I, we don't have a crystal ball. So it's one of those things where you just buy, you believe in the founder or the owner. That's really my selling marker, I guess. If I really believe in the person building the IP, then I'm in.
Yeah, I like that. I like everything you said there. It is in that regard, it is kind of more like investing in a startup company than it is investing in a sports card. So
Exactly.
maybe it's more of a parallel or an analogy where it's you're investing in a startup company. If you believe in V-Friends more and you happen to have an asset, you happen to have a collectible that you can sell and get out of. But it's more like that than it is trying to flip a sports card. And I think, from Gary's perspective, from what he's told us, he believes in supply and demand. And so he believes that the demand for these cards will grow. And when I say these cards, I mean specifically fictional character rookie cards will grow from, using his words, like being at the Comic Cons of the world and seeing sort of the geeks or the nerds or whatever
Right.
getting into cards sooner rather than later because they care so much about these characters. And so, he's been right about a lot of stuff similar to that in the past where, he's been early on a lot of different things. And so it's interesting. I haven't been at Comic-Con. I haven't followed any of that. So,
Yeah.
I don't have much of a educated opinion on it other than when I compare it to sports cards. I struggle a little bit
Sure.
because of how I flip sports cards. But I think using your sort of analogy of, well, I'm putting words into your mouth, but like the analogy of like when you say believing in the founder, it makes me think of kind of investing in a startup, which is kind of cool. So
Yes.
anyway, just wanted everybody to kind of know our take on that, since we've each talked to Gary very recently, and the Topps Chrome V-Friends are out. You've all either pre-ordered them or haven't pre-ordered them by this point, and most likely, and you're probably if you're into it, you might be going to buy more off of eBay and things like that. And obviously, if you haven't heard Clark's interview or my interview with Gary, you should go check that out on Cards to the Moon and the Sports Card Strategy Show. Two different interviews, so definitely go check them both out. All right, Clark, let's get into some of these sports card related questions for everybody now. So some questions that I didn't get to ask my colleagues at nooffseason.com during our webinar. One of the biggest things we do is grade cards and sell them for profit, hopefully, if we get the grades we want. If we're good at finding the gradable copies of the cards that we know we need to go out and get, which we use, obviously we use our formula at nooffseason.com to kind of help us get there quicker. But one thing I'm curious to talk to you and others in the hobby about who've been doing this a while and are really good at it. What is your process for finding gradable cards online? Because I think that's where obviously it's a little bit more scalable. We can all do it. We don't have to be at a card show. We don't have to be at a hobby shop. But we don't get to see the card. We don't get to hold the card before we buy it. We have to buy it. So it has to be a different process. Like I'm sure we've all gotten a card that we've bought offline and thought, crap, this is not in the condition that we thought it was going to be. And so what do you look for? What's your process for finding gradable cards online?
Yeah, I love this question because this reminds me of the early days of me getting back into the hobby and trying to find those, gems that are raw and yeah, exactly what you're saying, to flip after you grade them. But I might take a different angle. Maybe you take a similar angle. But what I do is I'm always like suspicious. Like, why are raw cards being listed? Why don't they just get it graded? You could get a premium for it if it comes back a PSA 10. So that's my thinking initially going into it. So why is this person selling it raw? So what I always do is you got to look at the seller info. Like, you got to see who's actually selling it, right? And if you see it's like a top seller, they sold thousands of cards and most of it's graded. And then you have the occasional raw. That's a red flag to me. Maybe they're selling it raw for a reason, because it's not in near mint condition or mint condition. So for me, that's a red flag. So I look for sellers that have not zero feedback, but low number of feedback. Maybe they're just getting into the game and they don't know much about grading and they just want to flip. They just, open a pack of cards. They don't necessarily have any attachment to it, so they want to flip it and then use that money to buy more cards. And if that seller has a rating of 50, and then what else you should do is look at other items that they're selling. Are their other inventory all raw cards as well, or is this the one exception? If that's an exception, then you're like, okay, that's another red flag. But if everything else that person is selling is also raw, then maybe he's just putting it up for it to be listed. So if those things fit the bill, then you got to look at the picture, right? You got to look really close. Is the centering is probably the first thing you should look at. Is it centered nicely? Does it have a picture of front and back? And then is the picture clear so you could kind of see the surface and the edges and corners as well, right? So that's kind of my initial approach in trying to find raw cards that that could be on the market and it might be a good candidate for grading. So and I'll add one more thing before I'm interested to see how you do it. But are the singles or are the raw cards that are being listed from sets that just came out? Because if it just came out, then maybe they just don't want to deal with grading it, waiting for 30 to 40 days. Maybe they just want to flip it right away and buy more cards. So that's another, indicator that I look for. Because if it's a 2022 set and it's raw, then, a smart seller would probably look at the PSA 10 values, and if there's a really good premium, they would have for sure graded it first and then flipped it, right? But if it's a set that just came out and there's a lot of raw cards that are listed, then I wouldn't think twice. Maybe I just would just take the chance of picking one up and then sending it off to PSA myself. So yeah, that's kind of my approach.
Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff there. And it's a lot of great validation from some of the things that we talk about at nooffseason.com. And like, it's kind of funny. The first thing you mentioned was checking the seller and going through kind of some of their other items. And it's funny because we've actually had some of our premium members have reached out to me and said either should I or I already have done this. What do you think? Where they literally create two eBay stores. One is for only raw cards and one is
Right.
for only slabs cards. Have you ever heard of that?
No, but that's interesting.
Yeah, so we've had premium members do that because of what you
Right.
said, where they don't want to be judged for that. It's not that they're trying to pull anything over on anyone. It's just
Sure.
more of like if they want to sell both, they don't want to be scrutinized for selling both or kind of have it play against them a little bit, which is interesting. I've had success. I tend to look at things not only as what I'm about to buy, but I tend to look at my experience as a seller as well when I look at that kind of a decision. Like, do I want to go through the trouble of creating two eBay stores? Not really, because I've had success selling raw cards when mainly I sell graded. Like, I mean, 99% of what I sell is graded.
Yep.
But then whenever I sell a raw card, it still generally goes pretty well for me. I mean, I've had a couple times where the buyer wanted to negotiate a bit of a refund because it wasn't the condition they thought it was going to be, kind of a thing. And that, I mean, whatever. I don't like that, but I've done it just to kind of move past it, move to the next thing, get the positive feedback. Not I think we all want to keep the buyer happy, kind of a thing. So that, other than that, I've had generally no issues at all with selling raw cards. And I think more actually, since I've started making more of the Panini Instant and Topps Now plays, I've sold more raw cards than what I realized, because I think like sometimes we think, okay, I'm selling a raw card because maybe I want to crack something out of a PSA 6 or PSA 8 or PSA 9. Sometimes I do that. Other times I sell a raw card because I know it's not going to grade well, like you're saying, right? So those two scenarios I could see why you do that, why you and others do that, which I think is cool. I don't do that just because it's like an extra step for me. Like it's almost like I should do that. Like I think you're smart for doing it. I just don't, because it's like an extra step that I kind of forget, to be honest. I'm like so dialed in with trying to find a particular card. I think where I'm more selective is on the actual card itself. So I go through a process where, like you, I look at centering first, and actually let me step back a step. My process is I will go in searching for one card at a time. Like I don't go in and this is very recent, actually. This is probably something that I've within the last 6 to 8 months just started doing, where I don't go search on eBay and start to look at a bunch of different types of cards from like either from the same athlete or different athletes. Like I'll literally go look for one Arch Manning 2024 Prism Draft Picks silver graded rookie, and I will search for gradable copies of only that card within that time period that I'm searching.
Right.
And then maybe later in the day I'll go look for a different card, but I'm not like my brain, I'm not making my brain look at different cards, right? So I think as I've done that, it's allowed me to, for those ultra modern cards that are a little bit more easy, that are easier to find, that aren't like super short printed or serial numbered or whatever, it allows me to really be picky. And so then, like you said, I look at centering first. So if it's not like in my mind, and maybe use a centering tool. Usually I don't use centering tools because with Prism, with Optic Donruss, like anything with like really clear borders, even Topps Chrome, like typically will have really clear borders. Bowman's changed up a little bit, but you can still kind of you can still kind of tell the centering. It's like if the card doesn't have a border at all, like maybe 2018 Shohei Ohtani Topps Chrome like those kinds of cards don't really have necessarily a clear border. So it's a little harder to tell centering. Tiger Woods 2001 Upper Deck, like those cards
Right.
are a little bit, but generally I can look at centering first. If it's not completely centered, perfectly centered by my own, just my eye, I just move to the next card. Because my assumption, kind of like what you're saying, is like I'm convinced that there's going to be something wrong with the card that I can't see in the photo. So if I see anything wrong, starting with centering in the photo, my assumption is that there's going to be something else wrong with it. So I just need to move to the next card. The other thing that like my co-host Lefty McKee, I like to give him credit on this one, that I think is really cool that he does, is he'll go pull PSA 10s of that card and he'll compare the card he's about to buy with the PSA 10 and sometimes even a PSA 9, both of that card, to see, okay, do I see any similarities? And then before he makes his decision. Last thing I'll say is just, if you are looking at if you're looking at a card, this might be Captain Obvious, but if you're looking at the photos and the photos are not like straight on, or the person's like hand is holding, like you can see their fingers covering part of the card, like just don't, like, if your intention is to grade it, like just don't even bid on it, just move to the next one.
Yes.
I mean, you can't tell centering if the person's card is not sort of perfectly square at the camera. Like, so if you really want that card, just message the seller. I would say that would be the other thing, is like if it's a card that you're really wanting. Lastly, you made me think of this in your last comment, because you made a good point about, is it ultra modern or is it older? I will say that, I'm typically eBay only. Like, I'm typically not buying on any other online marketplace other than eBay, and I typically stopped buying in Facebook groups, Discords, and all that like several years ago. So I will utilize their authenticity guarantee a lot, especially if it's an older. I mean, if you're buying an older card to grade, if it's under $100, you're not really taking a huge risk. I mean, like, it would suck to lose $100, but it's not the end of the world for most of us. If you're paying, if you're looking in a situation where you're going to need to start paying closer to $200 to win that card, what I would highly recommend is find a card, or put yourself in a situation where you're bidding on a card that should be $250 or above, because of the eBay authenticity guarantee. Literally, if it's $249 or below, it's not covered by the eBay authenticity guarantee. So that would go for. Recently, I had a question from a premium member that was like, okay, I think it was a Mike Trout raw card from 2011. And it was like the target cost we were giving people was $251, and it was based on the 30-day average of the most recent comp. And then somebody said, well, what if I can get it for less? What if I can get it? What if I have to pay upwards of $300 to get it? And our advice was, you probably better, like, if based on the condition of the card, if you think it's a better copy of the card, more likely a PSA 10 or a higher grade, to go closer to $300, you probably should do that. Because if you're looking at 2011 Mike Trout, you want to avoid counterfeit stuff. You want to avoid, there's a lot of cards that kind of fit that bill. And so the eBay authenticity guarantee, if you win it for $249 or less and it's a counterfeit or something like that, you can really be screwed. So I think that's all part of my process in terms of grading cards. But I'd say my fundamental thing is I look at centering first. If the centering doesn't look perfect to my eye, I move on to the next card. And so, all right, Clark, what is your process for prepping cards for grading? Like, a lot of people in our community at nooffseason.com are very meticulous and fancy themselves a grader as well. And so, like, whether or not they actually send the card in for grading. So I'll include that in the question. Like, what do you do to prep the cards? Are you more on the, more on the side of whatever they come in, that's how I send it to PSA, or are you more on the side of do I take it out and give it a rub down and give it the 1-2 shakedown and all that stuff?
Can I be honest? I'm more the former. I don't spend that much time. The best thing I do is I submit it to an authorized dealer that provides some of those services, a wipe down, puts it into card saver nice and safely. I just find one of those there's a couple places here locally in Toronto that I trust, that I've gotten PSA 10s back from. So, I mean, for someone lazy like me, I guess that's the best route. Because to be honest, I don't know how much my preparation would help. I might even do a little bit more damage if I'm honest. So that's my honest answer for you.
I love that, because I think a lot of people go overboard and, worry, like, not that they're going overboard intentionally, but I think a lot of people really, really worry about this. Like, a lot of people get really, really nervous about, do I need to get the microfiber cloth out and wipe everything down? Do I need to, and I've screwed cards up in the past from just trying to get them into a freaking penny sleeve. So it's like, I don't want to take it out of the thing it's in.
Right.
I mean, unless it's in a one touch, and I know PSA is going to get mad at me for that, I'm going to take it out. But I mean, look, if I get cards from Panini and they're in the stupid top loader with the Scotch tape on it, which everybody hates, I still submit them to PSA that way, because I don't want to get them out of the thing and risk damaging them based on what I think I can wipe it off better with a microfiber cloth. Like, there's not much you can do anyway. Let's be honest. There's not much you can really do that's going to improve the grade of a card. You can make it life easier on a PSA grader, but I've submitted some things that I would hate to open up if I were a PSA grader, and I've still gotten a better grade than I would have if I would have, me wiping it down wouldn't have made a difference. That's not to say that stuff doesn't come in handy. I think as long as we're putting it, either leaving it in a card saver or top loader. I know PSA and other grading companies want card savers, but I think I'm still submitting stuff in top loaders, and it's been totally fine. People could argue that it slows down the submission process. Okay. I think actually mixing up cards from different eras within the bulk value submission levels actually is more detrimental to slowing down your grading submission than what you put the card in. So, I don't know, that I'm more like you, dude. I don't really like do much, to be honest. I do, obviously if it's someone, I do take premium member submissions. So if someone's, and for the most part, they all submit them to me the way that they need to be submitted. But I will obviously, like, part of our services, I do crack slabs for people. So as I'm cracking, and a lot of people take advantage of that because they don't want to do that themselves. So as I'm cracking slabs, I'm careful. I'm putting them in the penny sleeve and card saver, but I'm not really always wiping them down for fingerprints and stuff, just because it's not always necessary, and you can actually damage the card doing that. So, oh, you said something in there that made me think of another question. You're in Toronto. I think most of your audience knows that. I think most of our audience knows that. But for those that don't, there's a huge faction of the hobby in Canada that I don't think gets enough love in the hobby. Although, because you're all like, big part of the hobby, and so because you're in Canada, you guys unfortunately have to deal with some weird stuff and some additional costs and delays, being that a lot of the sellers are in the U.S. Not all, but most of the grading companies are in the U.S. and have most of their infrastructure in the U.S. So I know PSA has like some locations in Canada. Could you just answer a couple questions? Number one, how does it affect you on eBay? Does it affect you, like, when you're buying cards from US eBay sellers, does that affect you in any way? And then number two, the grading side of that, does it affect you? Like, well, actually, buying and selling on eBay, how does that
Right.
affect you? And then and the grading side, shipping and receiving cards back from grading. How does that affect you and others in Canada?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. It does. There are a couple of extra steps that you need to take for sure. Being an international buyer or seller, I guess we are considered international because the U.S. is home base for a lot of these things, right? But there are a lot of third-party companies that you can work with. So if you're buying from U.S. sellers, which is the majority of the time, there are reship kind of services where you could buy a bunch of cards, consolidate it, and then you at least save some money on shipping it all at once instead of shipping it one at a time. And then there's duties and taxes that you have to consider as well. So you might as well save on shipping if you are a high volume buyer, right? So there are companies in the States that you can ship to. It's almost like a PO box, and then they'll do the service of consolidating everything into one box, and then at least you save on that shipping because you only ship one thing. And then you got to consider insurance and like I said, duties and taxes that are involved with the cost of goods. But that's just the cost of doing business. In terms of on the selling side, there are other companies that you can send your cards to, and they'll drive it over the border, and then they'll just get it into the USPS system that way. So there are services that we Canadians can use to make it cheaper, actually. And it's funny how things work. We always complain here in Canada about our Canada Post, which is our mail system here, being so darn expensive. And it's actually much cheaper to sell and ship using this third-party service to Americans than to sell to a fellow Canadian, because the postage on Canada Post it's crazy. And the thing about USPS, I know there's a lot of complaints about USPS, but one thing we don't have is tracking on every package. You have to pay extra for that in Canada, and that's another $5-10 sometimes, depending on where you want to ship it to. So at least you guys sometimes don't know what you have. You take a lot of things for granted, guys.
Man, yeah, I didn't realize that it was.
Yeah.
That it could be cheaper to mail something to the U.S. from Canada than to mail it to a fellow Canadian. That's interesting. I like the ingenuity of services that are driving things across the border. I'm a big fan of that. Yeah, I mean, a couple things there that I didn't anticipate talking about this, but there's a couple things that I think might be helpful to the listeners. Number one, yeah, I'm a big fan of the USPS system, actually. I know there are horror stories. There are horror stories with any business.
Sure.
Especially any business that does the volume of the United States.
Right.
But I'm a big fan. So there's one actually at Sports Card School at nooffseason.com. I put out a video of this where, if you sell a card and it doesn't get to where it needs to go, which has happened to me. I have over 2,100 sales in my eBay account that I started in 2021. And only twice have I had cards that I mailed to a buyer not get there. And both times they've been under $100. So I mean, it's different if you want to add extra insurance. It's maybe $20 or $30 extra dollars if you want to add insurance that's going to cover a more expensive card, say $2,000 to $5,000 kind of a thing. But if you're just generally doing the ground advantage shipping, it's going to cover up to $100 insurance. Both times I filled out a claim and gotten a check from USPS within like 7 to 10 days. I've been able to refund the buyer and be made whole myself from USPS. So, I mean, really, even with the lost, I think it's ludicrous that you guys have to pay extra for tracking. That sucks. But I guess that's all built into our ground advantage label, which is typically only, between $3.50 and $5 kind of a thing. So, but anyway, yeah. And there's a lot more, and one shameless plug is that at nooffseason.com, for any premium member, we kind of promote this to international people. because if you're wanting to just like grade your cards and sell them, we are a full service solution for a lot of people. A lot of our premium members, some live in Australia, some live in Canada, some live in Europe, kind of all over, where they will essentially drop ship us their cards. We'll grade them. When we get them back, you still have the option for us to ship them back to you if you want to pay for the additional shipping, which to Canada actually hasn't been that bad. We've shipped to some clients in some customers in Canada. It's only about, if it's say like a bundle of maybe 5 to 10 cards graded from PSA, it's only going to be about $17 for the shipping, and it's going to be it probably varies depending on where you live in Canada. It's also like maybe an extra 15 to 20 on your end to receive it though, which that kind of sucks. So it does add up, but yeah, to your point, it's the cost of doing business. But we also consign for you, so you get your, if you don't want them back, like we've done where people say buy 50 Cooper flag Tops Now cards to flip and they don't care about the card,
right?
We'll consign them through our eBay account and then send you the money via PayPal or whatever. So that's been a good, and I mean, that's kind of born from me having lived in Spain and kind of feeling, feeling everyone's pain a little bit if you're outside the US. Okay, cool. Now let's talk, Clark, about some of your biggest wins. So specifically, can you reach back, or it might be more recent, to talk about sort of where have you had, so like your biggest wins from a financial standpoint with having bought a card at one price and sold it for another. And can you talk about specifically which platforms did you buy on? Did you buy on one platform, sell on another?
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
That's a good question. I'm like you though, Paul. 99% of my buying is on eBay. So I bought things off Golden a couple of times when there's a card I really like. But for the majority of the time, I'm just an eBay buyer and seller. It just works the best for me, the easiest for me. And my co-host on Cards to the Moon, Hyung, always says this, that you get your profits on the buy side, right? It's never on the sell. You got to get find the right deal when you buy, you hold, and then when you sell, you made your profit because you got a good deal on the buy side. So rather than trying to find an arbitrage between platforms, I'm always looking for whether I think a card is undervalued. And funny enough, the biggest profit I made that I could think of right now is buying, I don't know if I mentioned this on the show before on our joint pod, but I'm a big fan of Anthony Bourdain, the chef.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying that.
Right? So I bought his Allen and Ginter. I was really into the Allen and Ginter, those quirky sets of non-sports guys. And I bought a mini autograph card for $35 on eBay just because I was a fan. And I just held. And, this is pre-COVID. And then once COVID hit and once the hobby that did its thing in 2021, 2022, and then I went to Fanatics Fest last year where I met you in person, I sold that same card for $2,000 cash USD, right?
Let's go. That's huge. And $35 to $2,000?
Biggest, percentage-wise, biggest flip, right? So
I've never been anywhere close to that, by the way. So well done by you.
And I didn't grade it. I was just for the PC, but when I found one booth that sold other Allen and Ginter sites, I'm like, and I brought it with me. I'm like, this guy might be interested. And when I asked him, he's like, yeah, I'm interested. So
okay, so let me ask you a question. So did you brought it with you to Fanatics Fest?
Yes.
And that was August of 2024. Walk us through the process of like, I'm thinking about selling this. Had you comped it out? Did you have a price in mind? How did the transaction go down with the guy?
Yeah, no. So like I comped it. The most recent comp was probably 2,400 US on eBay. And
okay, so you knew that you already had a big win.
I already knew, yeah. But I didn't know. It's not like regular sports cards, right? Yeah, you don't. there's not a lot of buyers for these things. But
True.
you know, when you come upon a booth where they have similar looking cards, you're like, this might be a good candidate. And sure enough, like you said, he was very interested. And and I think this is one of your questions that in the show notes. But when you, and we could segue into this, card shows versus transacting online.
Yeah.
Like I knew the comp was 2,400 online, but if you go to card shows, you save on a lot of those fees, right? And so I factor that as well. So I usually am okay with selling it slightly below comp online.
Yeah, that's a good point. 23 to 20. Some of you might be thinking, well, why didn't you sell it for 23 to 2,400 online if you saw a comp? Well, I think you just answered that question, right? Because you're easily that's easily gonna come down to 2,000.
Yeah.
And so to get the 2,000 cash and not have to ship it, just get it there while you're at the card show.
Yeah.
Talk about real quick. So talk about having that cash at the show. What does that allow you to do when you basically get that card sold? You made the decision to bring that card to the show, not just because you knew you were going to save on the transaction fees, but talk about really not having to go to the ATM, just bringing that card, getting that cash. What did it allow you to do at the show?
Yeah, so what I like to do at card shows too, and the benefit of having some extra cash on hand and other cards, and I think we talked about this as well, right? Where if you want to trade plus cash to make a deal happen, like that gave me the flexibility to look for bigger cards that I might have wanted, right? And I had other cards with me. So if I saw like a Mike Trout or anyone that I think is it's a bigger card, now I have a card that maybe that buyer, another buyer, might want to trade with me, but I can add $1,000 or $2,000 if that's what's warranted to make that deal happen. So it gives me that flexibility. I mean, I had extra cash on hand as well, but having more cash on hand definitely gives you more flexibility in making future deals. And like I ended up buying with some of that 2,000. There was a lot of exclusive Fanatics Fest drops. I bought a lot of those boxes and I flipped those as well, right? So yeah, exactly. And we'll probably try to do the same thing in June.
Yeah,
right?
we'll do the same. We're gonna see each other in a little over a month. That's gonna be awesome. Okay, that's gonna be fun.
So
Is Sean coming?
I hope so. I haven't really checked that in, but yeah, we'll see.
All right. Well, you can hang with Lefty and I. We're gonna be there, and
awesome.
then hopefully Hyung comes too, and we'll see a bunch of our other friends there too. So, awesome. Okay, yeah. I think too that having that cash at a card show, my play has been like, I'll keep my card show cards separate from my transacting online cards. And I mean, sometimes that means, I bought a card online, I graded it, it came back the grade that I needed, but I say, all right, I'm going to a big show coming up. I'm going to make this one of my card show cards, which I know means, okay, if a comp's $2,000, I'm probably going to get 1,800, maybe 1,700, but I'm going to have that 1,700 cash. I'm up anyway. And now with that cash, I can go buy things at hopefully 80% of comps or, something like that, to where now we're doing what Hyung wants us to do, right? Which is make the money on the front end.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to go, it's not just as easy as buy 80% of comps at a card show and you're going to make money, because the reality is if you sell it online, you're not making money. You're breaking even at that point because of the fees. But it at least puts you in a position where you're paying less than market value for it. And so you can either do an in-show flip, or if you're prospecting, you think that card's going to go up in value, you have a selling marker in mind, that kind of a thing. All right. So Clark, why don't you pick a couple of questions that you either want to ask me and answer, or just answer yourself from the show notes, because I feel like those are the questions I wanted to ask you, and it's already been awesome content.
Yeah, I just want to actually expand on the last question. How do you think about card shows versus transacting online, right? Because other than what we just talked about, considering and all the extra fees that are associated with buying and selling online. Another huge benefit of this, and I want to see if this is something that you do at the card shows, is do you buy a lot of raw cards at card shows? Because raw cards, we were talking about it off the top of this show, how do you find cards that are gradable? But obviously when you're at shows, you can inspect it much closer. Like, are you one of those type of buyers where you see a raw card at a card show and then you ask the seller, hey, can I take this card out of the case, and you inspect it?
Yes, 100%. Although I will say I wasn't up until very recently, within the last year. And I think that I actually, the reason why I am now is because I realized that, okay, out of all the different things I'm doing at card shows, what's ultimately making me more money, and where am I losing or breaking even? And where I was losing or breaking even is I was buying too many PSA 10s. I was buying too many PSA 10s thinking, okay, I've got this for 80 or 90% of recent comps. I did a good job kind of packaging things together to get a bulk deal and bring the price down. But then when I would sell it at my selling marker, yeah, I would sell it for more than what I bought it for, but it was like a very marginal win, or it was a break even because of the fees.
Right.
So I realized, like, the card show strategy and the online strategy that's better is to buy raw and grade 99% of the time. So to your point, card shows allow you to do that. But I think what I do more, because a lot of times at card show, like, I've become very picky. I'm really proud of myself because, like, in 2022 and 2023, when I first started going to a lot of card shows after I moved back to the States, I was just so excited to be there. And I would give a raw card a chance that probably didn't deserve a chance. But now, as of like 2024 and definitely 2025, I'm so picky with raw cards. So what I actually end up doing more is picking out like a BGS 9.5 or a lower BGS grade, and really examine the subgrades and really examine the card within the slab.
Yes.
In person, if the math lines up to crack and submit to PSA. And actually, what I'm going to start doing, I think, even more of, and a card show would be a good place to do this as well, is buying PSA. And actually, what's your take on this? Buying PSA 9s. I may have asked you this, I can't remember. Buying PSA 9s, knowing that if it doesn't meet the standard of a PSA 10, it has to drop all the way down to a 9, and there's no like mint plus to sort of catch it. Whereas for Beckett, when you look at subgrades, a certain card can very easily end up being a gem mint Beckett that's a PSA 9. Yeah. And so when you look at certain cards, this is never going to be easy to do, by the way. Nothing's, in my opinion, super easy to do. No, other people aren't just walking out getting an Anthony Bourdain card for $35. And then Clark, in fairness, had to hold it for a few years, and like it had to go up in value. But it's not easy to do what we're talking about doing. But essentially, instead of going, I'm going to crack a BGS 9.5 and try to get a PSA 10, what do you think of the strategy of cracking a PSA 9 to try to get a BGS 9.5 when there's a price increase to the BGS 9.5?
I like that play. I haven't tried it myself, but that's, I know friends that have and have profited well on it. So, obviously when you look at a PSA 9, not all PSA 9s are created equal. So again, you got to do that exercise of making sure it's centered enough. Like, why did it get a PSA 9? That's the question you need to ask, right? Is it a corner ding, or is it an edge, rough edge? Is it a surface? You gotta examine it. And if everything looks okay and you're like, wow, this could have been a PSA 10, then that might be a good candidate to crack and then submit to BGS. I love that play, because to your point, BGS 9.5, your point, BGS 9.5, if it gets a gem mint plus, that's another premium, right? So you have, different plays you could do with BGS.
Cards to the Moon listeners, on a couple episodes ago on the Sports Card Strategy Show, Tony Gwynn 1983 Topps PSA 9 is under $200. In BGS 9.5, it's between $700 and $800. In BGS 9, it's around the same price as the PSA 9.
Oh,
so
no brainer.
And in PSA 9, there's over 6,000 of them. So you can go find it, hopefully.
Right.
You never know if you're going to get it. You just need to get it for around the same price as a BGS 9 for that play to really have the risk mitigated, if you will. But there you go. I mean,
that's a good point, because
find these plays for you guys.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you got to do your homework too, right? What's the value difference between a PSA 9 and a BGS 9.5 and a BGS 9 for that card? Sometimes it's negligible, right?
Yeah.
But for Tony Gwynn in this case, it's totally worth it in my
I mean, you might lose your grading fee, but it's worth maybe getting a card from $200 to $800 potentially.
Yep, the upside.
It's no 35 to 2,000, but I think we would all take it.
I definitely take it for sure.
All right, so I mean, I guess my only last question for you, Clark, I guess would be like, if you had to pick between like an Allen and Ginter of, say, a celebrity like Anthony Bourdain, and we know he's passed away, R.I.P. So, but I mean, you can include that. Like death is a selling marker, by the way, for everybody out there. I think you and I have probably talked about this. Yes. Death is definitely a selling marker, unfortunately. But Jerry West, Pete Rose, I mean, they passed away within the last year, and their cards, they had the record sales of their cards when they passed away. So you can't tell me death is not a selling marker. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying morally we should all do that, prospect on someone dying, but their cards go up. So, okay. But anyway, if you had to prospect on a celebrity, say out of a set like Allen and Ginter, or I know even Gary Vee talked about like Kevin Hart having autos and things like that in the V Friends release, which is pretty cool. Or if you had to go like fictional character, like who are you picking?
Ooh.
Pick one. Right back.
Yes. Pick one. Our favorite regular weekly segment on Cards to the Moon. You know what? I think it's easy for me, especially with all the scandals lately. You never know, even in the world of sports. And we joke about this on our show every once in a while. There's not going to be a sex scandal with Pikachu anytime soon. Okay? So we don't have to worry about these things. Whereas celebrities...
If there is, it would be some AI deep fake of Pikachu.
Yeah. That's right. So, but with celebrities, anything's possible in Hollywood, and it's always the one that you're most surprised with too, right? It's like, what, that person? It's never the one you expect. So, if I got to choose one, I'm going for the fictional character. They usually have a squeaky clean character, unless they're a villain. But then you know what you're getting. So. So yeah, I'm going with a fictional character in this case.
Okay. I lied. I have one more question.
Okay.
So we may have hit on this in previous episodes, joint pods, but I think 2 or 3 years ago, a friend of mine who's big into like movies, he put together a list of fictional athletes, like the top fictional athletes of all time. And he put a lot of work into this. I don't know what he was doing where he had all this time. And it was really good. And so it inspired me. And again, this was a few years ago. You guys can go, I'm sure you can find it. If you go to nooffseason.com or youtube.com/Paul Hickey, you can probably find the episode that I put together where he and I talked about fictional athlete cards and the ones that I thought had the most potential upside as fictional athlete cards. And so it's definitely a rabbit hole. Is this something that you've ever dabbled in with fictional athlete cards? Because now you're taking the fictional characters that we've been talking about, not the Spider-Mans and the Hulks of the world, but obviously like it could be Ted Lasso, it could be someone from like a classic sports movie, like the Mighty Ducks, or whatever kind of hits your nostalgia to like even George Costanza having a card as the assistant to the traveling secretary for the New York
Right.
Yankees, kind of a thing.
Oh man, that is super niche, and
It is.
I haven't personally, but I always thought, I think I saw recently, that movie Major League, one of my favorite baseball movies.
Yes.
Ricky Vaughn, Charlie Sheen's
Yeah.
character. Love that character. That's more of a very personal, nostalgic one I would love to have. But the closest thing to it, really, to be honest, is WWE cards, right? They're like fictional characters. The Rock isn't really, that's Dwayne Johnson, but the Rock cards is a fictional character. So in that sense, I think there's definitely some appeal. But yeah, I think if you want, I don't know if you're going to profit on any of those. To tell you the truth.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's hard too because a lot of them are unlicensed. Like there's a lot of art cards from the movies like Major League and other
Right.
there's millions of classic sports movies that we could go through, and a lot of them are art cards unlicensed, super cool but hard to profit. Yeah, good call on the WWE. All right, my man, anything else you want to talk about?
No, I thought that was a great show. I enjoyed it today.
I enjoyed it as always. Clark Kim, 5 Card Guys, Cards to the Moon on Instagram, both of those handles, as well as Cards to the Moon podcast. Thanks again for doing the joint pod here with myself, Paul Hickey, Sports Card Strategy Show. Thanks everybody for being here with us.
Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5 Card Guys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at Trade You at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.